A rather unusual hour for a live chat. It's Tuesday and it's here. It's 9:45. I'm now speaking to you from Zgorzelec on the border between Poland and Germany, and I'd like to speak about ceasefires. As it's a live chat, if you want to ask anything, doesn't have to be relevant to the theme, please do so, but please do keep the language suitable. So we have seen in Ukraine a unilateral ceasefire which the Russian side requested, and I thought I'd do a quick recap of ceasefires which have happened in the past. Now, and then I'd sort of maybe talk a little bit about the one which was announced on the Russian side. Now, I'm in my motorhome, by the way, and I'm traveling. That's what you can see behind me. Now, the ceasefires obviously is something which go back a very long time. I mean, you'd get things. Hello, Ken. And in the Middle Ages, you could get situations, for example, when there'd be one side would attack another, or maybe one side would be in a castle. They would come to an agreement between the two of them, and then they would maybe wait a while, or maybe they'd maneuver, or whatever. But it could be a situation that there'd be nothing. For example, I think it was a siege of Stirling Castle in 1314, and I might be wrong on this one, where the agreement was that if one side wasn't relieved by a certain date, then the castle would surrender. I think it was Stirling Castle. I might have got that wrong, but ceasefires at the time were quite normal, and like in the Cold War, yes, a ceasefire is something like in the Cold War. That was a no-fire, in fact, the Cold War. Therefore, this is something which goes back a very long time. Now, one thing that really stands out to me, though, is a battle which took place to the south of Catania in July 1943, when there were British paratroopers together with British infantry units, and there was a bridge, Primosole, which was defended by the German paratroopers. And after quite a long time of fighting, they both came to an agreement of a ceasefire in order to collect the injured of both sides. And it would seem that both sides actually collaborated with collecting the injured of the other side. So it was a very much a gentleman's agreement between people who sort of saw themselves as they have to fight each other, but they're doing it unwillingly. I think the same sort of thing is from the medieval idea, whereby the knights at the top would see themselves, the knights on the other side, as being their equals, and you've got the peasants, and they don't really make any difference, even if the peasants are on your side. A similar idea was in the ceasefires that happened, I think, in the First World War, although this was the more from the bottom. It was more the peasants, so to speak, who didn't want to fight. The Christmas truce. Now, there's been all sorts of exaggerations and myths around the Christmas truce, but it wasn't a truce along the entire line. It wasn't even a truce. It was just locally agreed things, but it was of a very large part. I mean, comparatively large. There was more parts of far more parts which were still at war than weren't. But this was something from below, and it appears to have come largely from the German side. And the idea of playing football, which undoubtedly did happen. I mean, it does sound a bit like a myth. So that is one thing. Now, one of the things here, is there any consequences for breaking a ceasefire? Well, the thing is, it's a gentleman's agreement, and there can't be any consequences, because not even, as far as I'm aware, under international law. I should have looked this one before I even did the video. I didn't think of that. Didn't think that question might come. And what are the consequences for breaking a ceasefire? And as far as I'm aware, under the Hague Conventions, I don't think there's anything actually written. Although that's a good point and definitely worth looking up from a legal. The Geneva and Hague Conventions are on the internet. It doesn't take any difficulty to actually find them, so that could actually be read. There have been, for example, another ceasefire which happened in 1973. between Israel and Egypt. At the time, Israeli forces on the western bank of the Suez Canal, one of the most incredible advances in history, in my opinion, and they were trying to save the Egyptian Sixth Army. There were 3 ceasefires. I think it was the third one which actually held. Two of them failed to actually hold. I mean, it's very easy for a ceasefire not actually to work. And just to give an example, obviously this is fiction, but in the German 1992 film Stalingrad, there's a scene where the Germans on one side and the Russians, and they speak to each other, and they come to a sort of an agreement just not to shoot at each other whilst they collect the dead up. And there's one German there who starts shooting, and people get killed. And but the consequences for him in this film was that his own side threw him out and allowed him to get shot, if I remember rightly in the film. Obviously that's fiction, but they're the sort of things that actually could happen as the consequences for actually breaking a ceasefire. Now, in this current war, this was done, I think, purely for propaganda reasons. Now, when I was in the army, there was when we were doing training, there was this thing said there is no such thing as a ceasefire in war. You never agree to a ceasefire. You might ask for one if you need it, and it was in these. It's only if you need it. The side that asks for a ceasefire is the one that has problems. And the example was given probably totally incorrectly, but I'll say it anyway. This was a Christmas truce with the Irish Republican Army, which had happened in the 1970s, and the idea then was what they said. It might be completely wrong. That the British forces were on the point of breaking the IRA. The IRA asked for a ceasefire. They got it, which allowed themselves to regroup. That might be completely false. I haven't checked it, but that is the idea. You do not agree to ceasefires. This one here was done at the insistence or the idea of Metropolitan Kirill, who is the boss, I suppose, to say, of the Russian Orthodox Church. And Kevy writes a Christmas ceasefire. Yes, that's what I just mentioned, the Christmas ceasefire in 1914. Kirill is, I would say, somebody who's a particularly evil person. He is one of Putin's mentors. He's the one, despite having this religious position, he's the one who's pushing for this Russian imperialism, colonialism, and to a large extent possibly even genocide of other people. Now, Medvedev wrote something which was, I thought, particularly curious. Now, not so long ago, I mean 12 years ago, Medvedev, when he was the president and Putin was the prime minister, there was even talk on social media that in the 2012 elections that Medvedev might present himself as a candidate against Putin. Medvedev even said he'd investigate election fraud that took place in 2008, completely against the wishes of Putin, for example. Now, Medvedev is somebody who's arguing for the use of nuclear weapons. Medvedev said that this shows, this is done for Christian charity, words to the effect of, sorry, I haven't got the exact quote, I read it in Russian though a couple of days ago, and the Ukrainians were showing their barbarism and the lack of humanity by not agreeing to a ceasefire. Now, the ceasefire clearly was requested for propaganda purposes, but also it could have given the Russians a breathing space. Now, certainly wasn't actually adhered to, though. There may have been less bombing, not sending over so many drones. If they did send, I know there was at least one case of a drone attack that I'm aware of. But for example, at Bakhmut, now people I do the humanitarian stuff with were in Bakhmut, and I spoke to people there, and no, there's nothing. It's just the same. They just continued bombarding and doing what they want. So it was a propaganda ploy which it doesn't, in my opinion, this in the past it's never been used, as far as I'm aware, as a ceasefire as a propaganda ploy. I can't think of any other examples of it ever happening. So from that point of view, it's a first. Now, there have been local ceasefires in this war. In fact, there was one where it was agreed to, and then the Russians actually opened fire on the refugees which were allowed to leave during this local ceasefire. But although having said that, even local ceasefires, there was at least one that I know of that took place in the September campaign when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. So it was a 1-hour ceasefire. But these things do happen. But this isn't what Putin was. He wanted a complete ceasefire across the entire front. Having said that, Putin can get a permanent ceasefire, and all he's got to do is to pull out. It's very simple. Then he would hang on to power. He'd still be in power, and he possibly he could even possibly get away with not handing over the war criminals and not paying any compensation. All he's got to do is to get out. Of course, he won't do that, and so he could end up paying the price for it at a later date. Anyway, good. So I thought I would mention that one. Do I see any end to this awful war? No, I don't. I don't think there's any chance of this war ever. Sorry, not ever. But I don't see any chance of this war ending in the short term at all. The only victory can be military. There is no way, knowing the way Putin is, and what the aim of the Russian Federation, or rather not so much the Russian Federation, but the aims of the Putin dictatorship is the destruction of Ukraine and the annexation of the entire country, probably putting in some kind of a puppet ruler in it. Maybe some nominal independence, the same way as a number of places in Russia are nominally independent, such as Chechnya is nominally independent, and Chechnya has different laws to those that exist in the rest of Russia. So that's what I would suspect. Maybe the map wouldn't be drawn showing or maybe it would be. Maybe they would say these provinces which they annexed, in theory, are to Lugansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia are part of Russian, whereas the other bits are some kind of a rump Ukraine. I don't know, but I see no end from looking this from a historical point of view as well. I mean, this is like a bit like expecting Nazi Germany. The reason why Hitler never agreed to, I mean, I don't think Hitler had much chance though, because I mean, we definitely by 1942 there was no way out. I mean, I think the idea, for example, of the Holocaust was to burn his bridges, burn the bridges of everybody, then let everybody know that the Holocaust had taken place, which had took place in 1943, and therefore there was no chance of they had to see it through to the very end. I think Putin's in this position. If Putin is overthrown, we have to bear in mind that I mean, clearly a war aim should be, or would be, if there was the denazification of Russia, but that's not going to happen. So these extreme nationalists in the Russian Federation are extremely strong, and if Putin is overthrown, it's likely to be by somebody even more extreme than he is. He's not going to be overthrown by a liberal, progressive or whatever, something like that. So probably, I mean, I'd like to think that was possible, but I mean, at the end of the day, the communist regimes in Central Europe were overthrown by and replaced by more progressive regimes, but that isn't what happened in Russia, and unfortunately we have the state that we have today. So good. Thanks very much for listening. I'm now driving to Stuttgart, so I might even do some more. I've got other ideas in my head. Kev writes, sorry. With a ceasefire, do you think this is a tactic to resupply? Yes, certainly. Yeah, certainly. The advantage of a ceasefire, if as far as the Russians are concerned, is that if there was ceasefire, then presumably there's no drones, and the drones can't see what's going on below, if they're not flying. Therefore, yeah, resupply this. That would be precisely the sort of thing I would expect from them to do in circumstances like this. But then again, I mean, unless it's written, we know that the Russians do not respect laws and humanity anyway. But in a case like this, where there is, as we said at the beginning, there is no way of enforcing a ceasefire. And if somebody breaks it, then what you're going to do? So give them a 25 euro fine and then tell them not to do it again. I mean, that's something along those lines. There's no way that that could happen, as I see it. So, okay. Thanks for being here with me today. And I may do another one en route, because I don't like driving a long way. So nice to see you also, Kev, and all the best from me. Still in Poland, but in a short time I'll be in Germany. Bye for now.